In the silence between heartbeats, the Spirit of the Lord descended. He took hold of his servant and carried him through the veil of time, into the valley of what was once alive, a place where memories had turned to dust. Ezekiel 37, 1-2. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and carried me out in the spirit of the Lord, and set me down in the midst of the valley, which was full of bones. Around him lay the remains of a generation, promises forgotten, faith abandoned, the echo of a nation that had lost its breath. The bones were dry, very dry, the testimony of years devoured by despair. Yet even here, where the earth had buried its hope, the Spirit was not silent. For where man sees the end, God whispers, "This is where I begin." The word of the Lord moved through the valley, unseen, unstoppable. It brushed against the bones and stirred their remembrance. A sound arose, soft at first, then growing, the sound of destiny waking from its sleep. Every fragment remembered its form. Every remnant reached for its purpose. From the dust came the rhythm of restoration. What was broken began to seek wholeness again. There was no breath. They stood assembled, yet empty. The structure was restored, but the spirit was still absent. The valley waited for one more breath, the breath that only heaven could give. And the Lord said, "Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live." Ezekiel 37:5. For the word that once formed creation now stirs to reform the forgotten. The valley of dry bones had heard the whisper of resurrection, but the storm of life was only beginning. Spirit hovered over the stillness, as he had once hovered over the waters at the beginning of all things. The same breath that formed Adam in the dust now lingered above the ruins of his people, and from that holy stillness came a question, not to test the prophet, but to awaken faith from the ashes of reason. Can these bones live? The question rolls like thunder over the dust. It is not the voice of doubt. It is the sound of eternity inviting the impossible. For every age, every nation, every weary heart must face this same question in its own valley. Can what is broken be made whole again? Can the dream long buried breathe once more? And though the valley looked like a grave, heaven looked upon it as a womb. For the Lord of creation does not see endings. He sees beginnings hidden beneath decay. The bones that man calls forgotten are the very foundation upon which God builds renewal. So the Spirit asked not because he needed an answer, but because his word was about to become flesh again. The question is the spark before the fire, the whisper before the storm, the divine pause before resurrection speaks. The prophet stands still, heart trembling, eyes wide. Before him lies the evidence of death. Behind him, the voice of the eternal. Between them, the battlefield of belief. Every promise, every prophecy must first stand in the tension between what is seen and what is spoken. The Spirit's question echoes still through every generation. Can the church live again? Can nations broken by hatred rise in love? Can hearts turned to stone beat with fire once more? To the eyes of flesh, no. But to the breath of God, nothing is impossible. And the Lord of the living whispered through eternity, "You shall see what my word can awaken." For before resurrection, there must be revelation. And before life returns, there must be a question, a holy question that shakes the heart of creation. Can these bones live? Ezekiel 37, 4-5. Then he said unto me, Prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. The word of the Lord fell upon the prophet like fire upon dry wood. He had beheld the valley, he had walked among the dead, and now the Spirit gave him authority. Authority to speak what heaven wills, to command the impossible, to call life from the breathless dust. The Lord speak creation into the places where hope has been silent. Every word carries power. Every utterance shapes the destiny of the forgotten. The command is not for the lips alone, but for the soul, the wind, the dust itself. To prophesy is to release the unseen, and so the prophet raised his voice, not to shout, not to plead, but to declare the authority of heaven over death. For the valley had waited for one command, one word to awaken what had been buried in silence. The word moves as a river unseen, flowing into every hollow, every crack, every space that death had claimed. The dry bones begin to answer, not with breath, not yet, but with readiness, with alignment, with anticipation. And the valley itself seems to lean forward, as if listening, waiting for the Spirit to fulfill His promise. This is the sacred moment, the threshold between silence and song, between death and resurrection. The prophet speaks, and creation stirs. The valley has heard the word. The wind will follow, the breath will come, and the promise will be fulfilled. And so the word of the Lord begins to awaken the valley. The dry bones stand ready. The Spirit waits, and the breath of God prepares to return. For the command has been given, and nothing in heaven or on earth can hinder what has been spoken. The word had been spoken, and the silence of centuries began to tremble. A low murmur rippled through the valley, not of men, but of memory. The ground remembered its creator. Dust remembered its form. Death remembered it was not eternal. There was a noise, the sound of the forgotten finding each other, the rhythm of creation rewinding its steps, bone to bone, alignment to alignment, as if the earth were composing its own resurrection song. And behold, a shaking. The valley became an orchestra of sound and movement. Dust lifted in whirlwinds of light. Skeletons rose from the ground like ancient soldiers hearing their commander's call. The air vibrated with prophecy made visible. The command of heaven had entered the earth, and what was scattered became one. Where despair had ruled, structure returned. Order replaced chaos. Form replaced fragmentation. Yet still, they did not breathe. They stood silent, statues of destiny not yet fulfilled. The valley that once whispered of loss now thundered with potential. The sound of shaking had passed, and in its place, anticipation. For the Lord had shown that He can gather what was lost, but He was not finished. The Word had formed the body, but the Spirit had yet to bring the breath. And so the valley stood in silence once more, yet not as before. It was no longer a tomb. It was a temple in waiting. The bones were ready. The dust awaited the divine inhalation. For when the Spirit breathes, even the dead will remember the sound of life. The Word had taken form. The valley that was chaos had become a pattern. Yet what is a vessel without the breath? What is form without the fire that fills it? Creation stood still, perfect yet unfinished, awaiting the voice that calls the wind. The prophet's word became the channel of heaven. The call went forth, and the wind obeyed. Invisible hands began to sculpt the unseen. Flesh wrapped itself upon bone, sinew woven threads of gold, and the valley that once reeked of death now pulsed with the heartbeat of redemption. And in that holy pause, the Spirit of the Lord inhaled and exhaled into His creation once again. The breath of God, the same that moved upon the waters, the same that filled Adam in Eden, now poured into the valley of dry bones.
From the dust we were formed, and to the dust we return. Yet in His breath we rise again, and His word does not return void. And they lived, and stood up upon their feet, one exceeding great army. Ezekiel 37:10. The valley of dry bones, a vision of renewal.